And welcome to a Fantasy Fan Sportscast, where we talk fantasy sports from a fantasy fan's point of view. I'm your host, Easy Kill, and my co-host this evening and every evening when we do this is Chris Allen. Chris, how you doing tonight?
Not too bad. How you doing, Mark?
I'm doing fine as long as if we're back live on Facebook. It says we're Facebook. One of these days, maybe we'll do that too. I don't know, but we're on YouTube. We're live on YouTube. We're also live on Spreaker. If you go to Spreaker.com, just search for a Fantasy Fan. Click us as a favorite, and you'll get a little announcement every time we're on. We do this live every Tuesday night right the moment. As the season gets closer, we'll decide what nights are going to work best for everybody. But like I said, this is our second time an experiment here, being on YouTube, seeing if that helps. Right. I have noticed, I don't know if you've noticed in fantasy, which that's what we're doing. Again, anybody new hadn't listened to us before, just like I said, we talk fantasy. I'm the fan. Chris is the expert. He writes for a couple websites, posts a lot of stuff, blogs. He's a lot better at this than me, but I've played a long time. I have a lot of opinions. Chris knows that. Have a lot of, like I said, I come at this as a fan. I come at it as, sometimes different than experts would do it. And absolutely, you know what? I'm successful. I mean, I'm a winning player. But as a fantasy thing, and something we talked about last week, which is having a Twitter account. If you want to play fantasy, I've noticed 2 or 3 of the different fantasy podcasts now doing live stuff, not just on YouTube, but I've noticed a couple now doing live streams on Twitter, which I enjoy. The problem I have, which YouTube has now changed. Let me do this again. If you click somewhere, you can subscribe and you'll get a little notice, right. On YouTube. If you subscribe to Spreaker and follow us, you'll get announcements. But I do like the Twitter one. Twitter is one of those, again, if people are going live with fantasy information and it's video, I find that interesting. Now they announced it last week and I followed it. I think Friday was the first show. Fantasy Focus. Is that what they call the ESPN one? I think.
Yes.
It's Fantasy Focus. If you follow them, they're now broadcasting live every day at 11 o'clock on Twitter video versus waiting for the podcast to be recorded and then come out. And like we talked a little last week, which is do's and don'ts. And one of my do's was you get a Twitter account. The other do, just to go back on last week a little bit, is do stay as live as possible with the information you're getting. So if you can follow these people live and you can get information at 11 o'clock rather than wait for the podcast to post and come out an hour and a half or 2 hours later, it can be an advantage. I'm sorry. I mean, there's an advantage to that. So you know what? One of the big do's is you can't, anytime if you work at a job or you just have the ability to follow people live and hear and see what's going on. I think it's a big plus. Do you follow any of those, or I know your job's different. Mine, I have the ability to do it during the day, but is it an option you have at all?
I do, at least for a limited periods of time. I can at least pop in and watch some of the quick cut-ups of some videos of some podcasts and things of that nature. I don't have the time to sit down and watch a whole podcast or anything like the Fantasy Focus podcast does, but to some degree, yeah, I can catch a little bit of snippets here and there.
Right. And I think the first one I did was last year. JJ Aberry, I can never say his last name. Zacharyson. He did Periscope lives last year, which was pretty interesting, and I enjoyed that. Chris Harris, he's done the Saturday afternoons or sometimes Sunday, before game time, he'll do a live broadcast. I think last year, if I'm not mistaken, he was doing those on Facebook. So, those are little tidbits. If you play fantasy and you want to keep up to date as much as possible, following some of these people and keeping up with their live broadcast in baseball. And they do now everything. The Lenny Melnick fantasy sports website, they have a live chat room that goes on all day long. That's kind of one of the ones where I started on, in the chat room there. I'm Easy Kill. And that's, and I enjoy that. He's live every morning at 9:00 with baseball information. During the football season, they still do baseball. They do baseball every morning, 5 days a week, 52 weeks a year. They do baseball. So, if you're a baseball person, it's a lot of information. I know in football, there's 3 or 4 of the big podcasters that do it live, not live. They do a show maybe once or twice a week during the off season. So there's some that do it. There's hardly any that do it every day. But right now, we'll get into that real quick. Back to last week. What's your go-to podcast? What are you listening to the most right now as far as fantasy information?
For fantasy information, I'm trying to catch up on Chris Harris's podcast. I do like his blend of film review plus a little bit of statistical analysis that's incorporated into it. So I want to see what he sees. And my approach to listening to fantasy analysis is that I like to listen to the folks that lean on they come from areas that I'm weakest at. So if I can listen to somebody that does a lot of film work, so like the Matt Waldmans, the Chris Harris's, folks of that nature, or even like Justice Mosqueda and Charles McDonald, the Setting the Edge podcast, where they break down a lot of offensive and defensive schemes. That's the stuff that I want to listen to because I want to continue to grow in my knowledge. So I'll go to the folks that look at it from a completely different perspective than my own.
Right, and I agree with what you said exactly. And like I said, and then I'm going to say, but I try to mix up just who I'm listening to, meaning I try to get a good, a cycle of multiple inputs from people because I want as many different views. So then I can pick the one I like or the one that works for me best or whatever, again, we've had that conversation. You can listen to one podcast and 30 minutes later, put on another one and both of them are saying exactly the opposite.
Right.
So, you kind of learn. It's like movie reviewers. People learn their favorite movie reviewer based on when that guy says he likes it, I probably like it. When that guy says he doesn't like it, I don't like it. It doesn't mean he's better or worse at his job. It just means his opinion is more like yours. And I agree. Chris Harris is more like mine as far as the way he goes at it. So I do enjoy, and do pay attention to his quite a bit. Again, I listen right now. The ones that are 5 days a week already, which is the ESPN one. The nice thing about that, it's 3 or 4 different people's opinion on one podcast versus just 1 or 2. So I enjoy that one. The football guys used to be my main one long years back. I have dropped down a little bit on theirs. I still listen right now because they're 5 days a week and I kind of pick and choose based on their topics. And maybe it's because I've listened so many years that it seems like it's a lot of repeat. I don't know if that's one you listen to. A new one this year. I don't know if you've heard or not. Is it called Underworld Fantasy?
Yeah. Roto Underworld.
Yeah, Roto Underworld. I never listened to it in my life. Heard him on another person's show.
Matt Kelly?
The Podfather. Is that?
Yes,
I couldn't tell you his name.
Matt Kelly, yes.
Talk about a unique perspective. Yes. I have found him very enjoyable. So that's one. The actual Roto World football podcast is one.
Very good.
Mm-hmm. The Audible, which actually the Audible's the football guys.
Yes.
The other one I was talking about wasn't the football guys. It's the I got a new cell phone. I can't figure out how it works out too. The other one I was talking about was the footballers, the Foot
Fantasy
Clan
footballers. Yeah.
Fantasy footballers. That's the one I'm talking about. I don't know.
Mike Wright and Jason and all those guys.
They all, I don't want to say this. I don't want to even sound negative. I enjoy all 3 of them. But at the same time, I don't know. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's their, I don't know if it's their, the word gimmick's not even right. It just, I don't know. I'm just being real honest. It isn't one of my go-tos like it was maybe just a couple years ago. I've noticed every year I listen less and less. And it's not that the information's bad. So please don't take it that way. But
they do live shows now too.
They do. They are another one that they do live. if you want to say that, meaning
yes.
they do live, like you can go and, and buy a ticket. And I mean, they're big. They're on the FNTSY. Fantasy network. Now on that, they're not live on that. It's a recorded, their podcast. They're on every day late at night. I still do the fantasy network during the day. The problem now is now in the middle of the afternoon, they have, or not, from 9 to noon, they have Colton and Friends or whatever. It's more of a sport.
Heard of them.
Well, no, he used to be Boomer and Carlton in the morning, the big New York show now. And he had some legal troubles and he got fired. I think, what's the big sports network in New York, like the Fan or something like that. So he got let go from that show and he had been off the air for a while and he's back on now. The problem I have with him is, no, trust me, he's very entertaining. The show is hysterical, but it's just sports talk. Okay. You know what I'm saying? There's no fantasy. Don't want to say no. I can't say no fantasy. It's very minimal fantasy. Let's go that route.
Gotcha. So they do more like just the general, like teams.
Yep. If you ever listened to Boomer and Carlton back in the day, which they used to be live on, like, a couple of radio stations in our area carried him because Boomer Esiason was from here. I like 5500 AM or one of those. I used to be able to listen to them. But yes, just sports talk. All kinds of topics. And now that's now they do have Corey Parsons on there. He is a big fantasy guy. He has his own show too. The fantasy, football, something on that same network. Okay. So every once in a while they'll bring in some fantasy information, but my problem is in the regular season, I'm not wasting 3 hours of my day listening to sports talk. Right. I don't, I want to hear fantasy information and I'll be honest, even tonight, listen to Road to Wonderworld. He spent 15 minutes on one player that got cut from the Raiders. Who was the not got cut, the guy who hurt his leg and now's out.
From the Raiders?
Not Raiders, Patriots.
Oh, Jordan Matthews.
They went 15 minutes, and this is a true fantasy show, and they spent 15 minutes on how it affected him and the player and blah, blah, blah. And really, I'm like, you know what? It would have taken 2 minutes to say, hey, if he's on your cheat sheet, cross him off, and move on. I don't know. I find, and I realize those kind of shows are trying to fill time.
Yes. They
don't have the skill like me and you have.
Hour and a half to 2 hours.
They don't have the skill me and you have, where we can just BS for an hour and a half. We don't need to go on something stupid because we've already done that probably. Yeah. But I don't know. When I'm listening to that kind of stuff and I'm listening to those expert type people, I'll use, industry people, and I am very air quotey on those things. And again, I like the guy, but again, he went off 10 minutes on, this one player that really isn't going to affect anyone unless you're a dynasty player. And even then he's probably close to cuttable. So, right. Again, back to the same thing. We just went off on a tangent for, 13 minutes. It's not on any sheet, anything I put on anything.
Nope.
Well, I did kind of put that we were going to try to do at least one more do and don't from each of us. Maybe we kind of do that early on here so everybody can have an idea of, for new people. So that's still my thing is, I know we talked about last week as a do, but definitely do try to listen and follow live people. Try to get as much modern, up-to-date, information, and like I said, get a Twitter account. So
for sure.
That would be the first thing. So let's jump into our first, what would be real topic. And that's just quick camp news. I'll just start with you. Is there any real important news that you want to start off with? And then I'll go over maybe a couple of things I have if you don't mention them.
I would say a couple of things that I've picked up over the last few days. If folks weren't already tracking, well, let's see. I don't know if I can boil this down quickly, so let's just go.
That's okay.
But let's go through a couple of teams. The Chicago Bears, if you haven't already been targeting Anthony Miller, definitely be targeting him. There hasn't a day gone by where I haven't seen or heard of him making a highlight reel type of catch. So that's the Bears. Everybody else seems to be doing fairly well. I did hear that Jordan Howard banged his knee earlier today during practice, but that's not supposed to be anything significant. And then there was also another injury, but again, it wasn't deemed to be completely significant. But their preseason game is coming up this week, if I'm not mistaken. So I wouldn't. They're not expected to play this week, either of them.
I mean, I do have that note just because you said that as part of camp news. Doesn't everyone have between now and Monday? I think every team this week has a preseason game, right?
Yes. Yeah. I think a lot of them should be playing over the next week, but I guess from what I understand, they're not expected to play in their very first,
game. Which is normal right now for most starters, hurt or not hurt.
A lot of them, it just depends on the coach. I've seen a lot of them that might have them out there for like the very first offensive series, and then they're out for the rest of the game. And then it's the second stringers, third stringers, rookies, things of that nature. So that's about as much of the starters as you're going to see.
Right.
Yeah, so that's for Chicago. For Green Bay, Randall Cobb has been in and out with the ankle injury, the same one that he had surgery on earlier this summer. It was the same ankle that's been bothering him. Apparently, he sat out of practice, and it looks like there was a wide receiver with the last name Yancey, if I'm not mistaken, that was taking reps in the slot behind him with him out. So that'd be a player that you should at least have in your back pocket for DFS purposes, so that if we're already assuming Devontae Adams has an outside role, if we also assume Geronimo Allison has an outside role, then I forget, I don't know his first name, but last name Yancey, he'll be the one to replace him in the slot. Let's see what else we have.
But just before you go past that, though, if I'm not mistaken, I thought I heard, didn't he practice today, though?
He did, but then he left early.
Back, right?
Yeah,
okay.
He did come back, but then he left early.
Again, I'm trusting you. You're more the news guy. I'm just going by, like I said, I'm the fan. I listen to a bunch of podcasts every day. I read a few things, and that's what I bring to the table here. I'm going to, and I thought I heard that today where somebody mentioned
absolutely
that he was.
I think that. Yeah, I try and follow the news as much as possible versus looking at clips of like one-on-one drills or anything like that. And I only pay attention to injuries or players that are running with the first team offense. That is my primary focus throughout the preseason. So for the Ravens, John Brown, ton of highlight catches. It looks to be like he's able to manage his health deficiencies, so he looks to be doing well. But on the injury front, it looks like Kenneth Dixon in and out of preseason yet again with a hamstring injury. So if anybody was banking on him to come back and take over the backfield this season, it doesn't look like it's happening. If he's already having hamstring troubles after coming back from injury, after coming back from suspension, I wouldn't bank on it. For the Patriots, same old for the most part. Yeah, that like you just mentioned, or like we just talked about earlier, Jordan Matthews cut with the injury problems. But it looks like, if anything, the team should be able to re-sign him for just a basic minimum contract in a couple of weeks if they want to. They allowed him to clear free agency, so he remains open to a bunch of other teams, but if they do need him to come back, then they can sign him whenever they want to.
Because while you're there, we talked the end of last week. That had just happened at last week's show. And they had obviously they signed Decker. That was one of my news things.
Yep.
And me and you talked about that last week as far as Decker going there. I don't think Decker could have found a better spot. Don't know what his value. Don't know what his value is. Let's say in a standard 16, 18 man league. To me, if you get over 18 players late in the draft, I mean, hey, for the first 3 or 4 weeks, I'm not sure you know.
Definitely worth a shot.
Sure. All right. Keep going. I'll let you keep going. Didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh, no, that's fine. If anything, I think that's pretty much it. I mean, we're hearing some rumblings out of camp about the running back. The running back duo, not necessarily duo, actually, it's a running back by committee for the Miami Dolphins. It looks like they signed Jeremy Langford, the former Bears running back that everybody seemed to hate on. That was like Mike Clay's whipping boy for about like a half a season or so. But he got signed by the Dolphins, so we're not sure exactly how he's going to fit into the mix with Kenyon Drake, Frank Gore, Kalen Ballage, and now Jeremy Langford. So it remains to be seen what he's going to do. I mean, especially considering that they just signed him yesterday and we're already into camp preseason form. So we can't really say whether or not he's going to make much of an impact, but it is interesting that they would sign another running back given the depth that they already have at the position. News out of the Detroit Lions camp is that LeGarrette Blount is supposed to like maintain at least the goal line role. So if you're already going like RB heavy in your drafts, LeGarrette Blount wouldn't be a bad guy to tack on at the end of your drafts, just so that he would be somebody that if you have an RB1 already as a fairly solid anchor, then you would be able to put in like LeGarrette Blount during bye weeks, even as a RB2 if you have heavy bye weeks, or as a flex play.
My issue on that one is I heard that two different places, and then you even worded it the way one person says, and then the other person, and then the place I kind of read that is that just LeGarrette Blount's opinion, or is that coming from a coach? Because somebody told me that was just, his opinion, and I'm guessing he would say that, so to me, if that's the case, I would take it, because that's what a player should say. Do you know where that actual information is coming right at the moment?
That was from a coach, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
I can find the source on it, but that came from a coach. And then all of his usage out of camp indicated that he was running with the first team offense ahead of Kerryon Johnson, ahead of Theo Riddick. Actually, Kerryon Johnson was actually working with the special teams group as well, doing some punt returns and kickoff returns. So it seems like they're ready to use Kerryon Johnson if they want to, but he's not going to be the primary focus. So that there is, I think there is some, I guess, logic behind that to run out LeGarrette Blount as early as possible. And then later on in the season, if he starts to kind of wear down, then they can bring in the fresh backs in terms of like Kerryon Johnson, or even Amir Abdullah. If he doesn't get traded anytime soon, they would also have him as well.
Well, I have LeGarrette Blount late on my, cheat sheet. I have him marked as a late sleeper guy. If, back, same thing, especially, I know we've talked all the way back. I'm still in a wide receiver early kind of guy right at the moment. And so, I'm going back and forth as far as, if I do that, I'm going to load up as many running backs on the back end as I can, especially ones that maybe could be, the lead dog or the number one, or maybe at least get me a touchdown every week. So, I'm kind of going back and forth, but I do have him. I mean, to me, it's just one of those people that we had that conversation. I have late people or late picks. I'm trying to get people to have an opportunity to be number ones, not just people who, have an opportunity to, play a little or get some. So we'll see. Anything else?
I think that's about it. From San Francisco, it looks like they're Jimmy Garoppolo is like getting some. I think he's working out some chemistry with all of the receivers that he has at his disposal. But it does seem like Pierre Garçon is still getting some love. Marquise Goodwin is getting some love. I mean, it looks like all the receivers that he has to use, like I keep hearing about, and Dante Pettis as well, the rookie that they drafted. It does seem to be that he's been able to find each of them and work with them for like long TDs, or like definitely like hitting them in the 2-minute drills that they're using. So, I mean, I would say that spread out your, I guess, exposure to each of them, because they could be viable depending on which week that you might, that might be coming up. So that's just one thing that it looks like, but it all intersects at Jimmy Garoppolo, right? So I would say that in the case of who you're going to draft, you might want to just draft Pierre Garçon if it's a PPR league, Marquise Goodwin if it's a standard league, because you might get the yardage and the touchdowns, something like that. But if anything, it looks like San Francisco is looking to be popping though once we get into the regular season.
Right. All right. You kind of touched on the couple things I had. So, that's a good thing. I noticed there's been a few, Callaway, the Browns, wide receiver now that has, marijuana in his vehicle.
Yes, yeah, I heard about that report and saying that it wasn't his. Somebody else borrowed his car, put it in there, left it in there. It's not a good look considering that he had a track record of that before they drafted him.
I know.
So I find it very very odd that that's the first thing that happens to him.
But let's stay on the Browns wide receivers. The biggest thing is Josh Gordon. They've told him, I think there was a deadline, a date or issue for him to have some free agency time. They've said they'll waive that, I think. So, they're more or less, they're helping him out. They're taking care of him, I think. There's still a lot of rumors on what he's doing right now. I guess he's down in Miami working out with the Canes. But I still think most things are pointing on that he's going to be back at least probably with a week left of training camp, if not, 2 weeks, and then probably for sure being here for opening day, I guess. But I've not heard any more now coming from the NFL office. Is that, originally they made it sound like they were going to do something about it, but I've not heard anything now from them. So is this strictly a team problem, or if it's a problem at all, what I'm saying, is just the team handle it and that's it? The NFL really has nothing to do with it.
The NFL doesn't have anything to do with it, as far as I know. It looks like, if anything, the Browns are looking to make the right move so that Josh Gordon doesn't receive a fine. If anything, I heard earlier today that they moved him over from the NFI list, because if he stayed on the NFI list and didn't report to camp, he would wind up being fined by the league. So they moved him over so that he wouldn't receive any other bad judgment or punishment from the league. So they're making sure that he's doing the things that he needs to do in order to get his mind right in order to play. So it doesn't sound like there's any bad test, or he didn't fail a drug test or anything like that. It doesn't seem like there's any suspension looming over him or anything like that. He just wanted to get away from all the noise from the cameras and doing Hard Knocks and all that, which is a smart move in my opinion.
I agree. All right, we're going to get into our topic of the day. The show name was Dropping a Deuce. We are going to talk about number twos. And for you new fantasy players, number two in fantasy, and I'm going to give you my opinion, and then you can tell me what you think. I mean, my opinion of a number two is obviously the next guy up, possibly. And, or maybe, number two is in the number two snaps, meaning, they're number two on the team at a position and they're getting snaps. And the reason I say that is I always kind of, when they say number twos in running back, I kind of consider the number two in running back the next guy up, or the handcuff, not necessarily the third down back, but we can discuss that. Where in wide receiver, that's a different thing. And to me, the number two in a wide receiver is, the second, the second option, and or the guy that's not running, as many routes as their number one. So I don't know, is there a better way to explain it? I'm just telling you my opinion of what a number two versus a number one would be. Is that correct, or do you have a different opinion?
No, I think that's a fair way to look at it, because if we're looking at RB2s, wide receiver twos, or even tight end twos, if you really want to go that deep, which I don't think anybody would want to go that deep in terms of the tight end landscape. But for wide receivers and running backs, I think that's fair. For running backs, we're looking at typically the handcuff, the person that should the running back, the primary running back, get injured, that's the person that's going to take over. I mean, you could point to the Chris Thompsons, the Tariq Cohens,
we'll get into names here in a minute.
Backs, but
we'll get into names.
I wouldn't generally put those as running back twos, because if the primary running back gets injured, their workload is not going to increase. We're looking for an edge here. So we were looking for, should the opportunity present itself, who's going to benefit the most from it? And even if it's somebody that's sitting on the street, for wide receivers, it could be Des Bryant, somebody like that. But that's what we want to do. We want to try and highlight some of those players that could be of value to us should the situation present itself.
Right. Because I didn't want a new listener out there also to think when we say number two, meaning my RB2 spot or my wide receiver 2 spot. You know what? Because my opinion is I want those to be number ones also. So, that's where I want to go. I don't know at this point if you prefer that we start with running back or wide receiver, and then I don't know if you prefer, maybe I can start. I've got a list of each team, and I have a, few teams I don't have any information because to me it doesn't matter. And then I have some highlights on others, or I didn't know if you had a list or if you wanted to start with ones you thought were most important. We can do it either way. All right.
And where are we starting? Running backs or wide receivers?
Let's start because I thought running back would be the quickest and easiest because again, it's a little, there's a lot of teams where it just doesn't matter, or the number one is so dominant that, my opinion when I'm talking, and we'll just go, and I have it in alphabetical order somewhat, Baltimore and the Bills, I don't even have anything highlighted because the number one isn't necessarily set. So the number two is a little harder. So the first one I have here is, especially, and these are fantasy relevant, and that's the Bengals, alphabetical order, and that's Giovanni Bernard. To me, he is the number two that actually has value as the depth chart stands now. He is going to get playing time. He's going to get passes, definitely more valuable in a PPR.
For sure.
But my big issue is if Joe Mixon has health issues or starts slow, Giovanni Bernard could definitely be a top 15 running back at the end of the year. I mean, that's my opinion. I mean, I feel that he is to me definitely a positive number two, and a number two with a lot of upside. If the number one, he is one of those number twos where, you can throw him in a flex if you need him.
Mm-hmm.
But if he becomes the starter or for any reason, he's got the ability to stay on the field for all three downs.
Absolutely. I think, and when it comes to Gio Bernard's value, he presents one of the greatest values, I think, in terms of like a running back tandem in the league for fantasy purposes this season.
I agree.
If you look at his, like the last, it was like 4 or 5 games where Mixon was hurt. I think he also had a concussion towards the end of the season. Giovanni Bernard racked up over, I think it was close to 300 yards in those last 4 to 5 games. His success rate was well over 45%. He's also catching passes. I mean, for DFS purposes, if you were rostering Giovanni Bernard in those last 3 weeks, you were profiting because you knew he was going to, if not 2x, 3x on it in terms of value on his particular salary. So I think that's an excellent value. And I think for this season, Joe Mixon has had for what? Mid to late second round pick, and you can get Giovanni Bernard in a 12-team PPR league in the 10th round.
Right.
So that 8-round difference for a chance at a top 15 PPR back, sign me up for that all day.
Right. A lot of value. And some of these will go a little quicker, and some, because, again, some of these, the fantasy relevant, the next one, and I just have highlighted again, and this is one that, the Cleveland Browns, this is one of those where we're not sure who the number two is. We definitely probably know the number 3 or the third down back is Duke Johnson. The rumor is the number 2 going to be Hyde or Chubb? Personally, I'm willing to take Chubb because he's the one going latest in drafts right now, and he could be a number 1. And my point is, especially in draft time, I want to draft players that have a chance to be number 1, hopefully early in the season, because if they don't, I can drop them, pick up somebody else. I have a lot of options. But the Cleveland Browns are putting together a nice offense. Their line offensive has gotten much better. And I'm still a Hyde guy. The problem is Hyde's going before him. Both are going late, but Chubb's going pretty late. So that Chubb would definitely be a number 2 that you would want to look at or consider. We'll skip the Broncos because I have no idea what the hell's going on there. Obviously there's a rookie there, Freeman. Same thing, if it's late, but I don't want to sit here and talk a whole lot there because I'm not a rookie guy.
Freeman's actually pretty expensive too. That's the hard part that I'm trying to figure out.
Exactly. But we'll never get through all these if we talk about every team. Houston Texans. Their number 2 is kind of a little crazy because of Foreman getting hurt. My issue is Alfred Blue looked pretty good at the end of last year and was actually getting more carries than Miller. And right now you can pick him up after your draft on the free agent market because he's not even being drafted.
Right.
And the same thing, there's a possibility that if Miller would struggle or have any health issues, with Foreman still being down, Blue could be the starter, week 2. Who knows?
It's true, but my only concern with that is that they are dead last in terms of offensive line rankings.
I know that. I mean, again, it was just one of those where back to the same thing. If you go wide receiver, tight end, that type thing, and you're just going to throw 8 darts at the end, and you're trying to just get a starting running back, it's going to get you 12 points, because your 4 wide receivers in a PPR are going to get you your points. You just don't want zeros, or you don't want something.
That's you just need production, production.
We're going to skip the Cardinals because they have a set number 1 there. The Falcons obviously are similar to the Bengals. They have Tevin Coleman, again, one of the few number 2 running backs that has value as it sits right now. Flex maybe. I'll be the first to tell you though, I'm not drafting him to start him. I mean, if I pick him, it would right now. I think he's going too high for me. I think he's going higher than Giovanni Bernard. I'd rather have Bernard, I think, a round or 2 later. So now, and I think in the same situation. Now, some people would say that there's a better chance of Freeman going down so that Coleman might have a little more opportunity. That's because Freeman's got concussion issues, so it wouldn't take much of a hit. So that would be my only thing. I personally would still take Bernard over Coleman, just because it's, a couple rounds later.
Absolutely.
The other one to me that I find still a little thing, Carolina Panthers. McCaffrey in a PPR is probably the number 1, but I mean, at the beginning of the game and they're handing off in a standard formation, is CJ Anderson going to be the guy? Is he the number 1 or the number 2?
From what I'm hearing, Ron Rivera is saying that Christian McCaffrey is supposed to be the RB1. Now, if he's actually going to be used that way in a North Turner offense, that's yet to be seen.
My point skeptical. Is, I guess I'm asking though, is CJ Anderson going to be in the backfield on the very first play? I think so. Same thing. So, and he's going pretty late in the draft. I mean, if I had to pick, I think I'd rather have CJ Anderson than I would have McCaffrey, just because McCaffrey you got to get in the second round.
Right. So, and CJ is going in the late 8th, mid 9th, somewhere in there.
Right. Skipping the Bears, even though with Howard now being hurt a little bit, but I just don't believe Cohen can be an every down back, even if something happened to Howard. So that would be my thing there. Dallas Cowboys. Just again, very late flyer. Rod Smith. I mean, definitely. Would he be a Zeke Elliott? No, but I think he would be a fantasy, thing. The problem with him is, one, no one's drafting him unless you're drafting Zeke, maybe. But just someone to keep track of. We already talked about LeGarrette Blount. I would have no problem. If I had to put Blount on the end and I had to start him in my running back 2 because I have a bunch of wide receiver 1s that I just, if Blount gets you 1 touchdown, on 10 carries,
he's made your week.
Yeah. Well, he made your week if you're wide receiver heavy, which
roster construction plays a huge deal.
New people in fantasy. If you're in a league where, and I'll even say a 12 team, because 10 teams are weird, 8 teams are crazy. But if you're in a 12 team league where you have no weaknesses, find another league. A good 12-man league, you're going to have weaknesses. You can't, that's what makes the game fun. That's the way the players are set up. You can't be, super strong in every spot. So if you decide to go strong at wide receiver, some of these running backs we're talking about today might be your starters, and you're not looking to get, I get it that David Johnson might get 30 points, or 28 points or 30 something, and Blount might only get you 14. The guy though that has Johnson isn't starting, 3 number 1 wide receivers. He had to, so it's all about total points. You don't get any extra points because your running back beat their running back. You win the league or you win that week because you scored at least 0.5 or 0.2 nowadays, more than the other guy. End of story. So, I'm still thinking that the Lions want to run the ball. So, I'll be curious there. Now, Caron, is that the other guy's name?
Kerryon Johnson.
Yeah. Is he another reason I know it? I know that's one of the currently that's one of the big team names is Carry On Wayward Son.
And, yes. Yeah.
But I don't know much about him. Again, I'm just not a rookie guy. Give me Blunt, I don't think Blunt's being drafted in most drafts anyway. We'll skip Jacksonville because, again, that to me is probably pretty much set. The big thing, Kansas City, the number 2 there is probably going to be Spencer Ware, who was a number 1 just a season ago, not being drafted. Definitely keep an eye out. Now, I don't know what that offense is going to be necessarily. I'm not even a Hunt guy, but same thing. Hunt in the first, or if you don't get him in the first, I see him going real early in the second, or I can take Ware on my 18th pick. The Chargers, I'm kind of going to skip. The Dolphins, who knows? The Patriots, this one's a little messy because right now is Burkhead. I would assume now's their number 1 because of the injury to Sony. But again, someone not being drafted that if he makes the team, Jeremy Hill still, he's a better player than I think more people give him credit. He had back same thing. Last year, the Bengals sucked on the line. So a year before that, Hill has some, Hill was a good player. So, and unfortunately, the Patriots have taken more players like that and turned them into fantasy, magic. So, gonna skip quite a few here because most of the Raiders, Steelers, Tennessee Titans, Deion Lewis, same thing. He's still going higher than like Giovanni Bernard. So
some drafts he goes before Derrick Henry.
I know. So, and it wouldn't surprise me if he's not the number 1 when the season starts.
Could be, yeah.
The Rams, we'll skip. The Vikings, Latavius Murray is a number 2 you got to keep an eye on.
Yes.
And I am a big believer in if you get Cook early, I'm not a handcuff guy, and I love to get other people's handcuffs. That's why I do what the names we're going over now. I would tell you guys, I'm not doing this because they're handcuffs. I'm doing this because I'd rather have other people's handcuffs. I'd rather know. I don't like having my handcuff because if my guy goes down, all I did was fill in the same spot. I like knowing that someone else's player went down, and I now have 3 number 1s. That's kind of the way I play. Now I have a trade chip. I have a flex guy. I have someone that's going to do a lot more on my bye week than I planned. So that's my goal. I don't look for my own. I look for number 2s with value up front, like Bernard, Lewis, some of those. But at the same time, Latavius Murray, if I go wide receiver, he's someone I'll put down there. I won't be able to use him right away, but Cook is coming off an injury. And if I'm not mistaken, I've heard a few things that right now he is in on almost all the third down plays it can.
Yes.
So he could be that Giovanni Bernard player. Maybe, we don't know. New Orleans Saints, I don't know. Do they have 2 number 1s or do they have, 1 and a 2? I don't know how that goes.
They have 1A, 1B.
Right. And that's still, in my point, that's still question mark. What they did last year has never really been done. So to do it 2 years in a row, the odds of that being done is slim and none. Sorry. Right now, both are going too high for me. So I'm probably not going to have either one. The Giants, Jonathan Stewart, blah, 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 maybe. The Eagles, Corey Clement, Jay Jai, Sproles, and even Smallwood. Smallwood's not a bad little player, but I don't know. Again, I'm taking Corey Clement. It's going a lot later. But I have in a lot of mocks, in some cases, Jay Jai has been like my number 2 running back, just to, because I'm trying to get someone that might be a starter week 1. San Francisco 49ers. Matt Breida.
Yes.
Is someone I'm looking at very late in drafts. Same thing. He to me, if something would happen to Chicken Legs McKinnon, Breida could be a number one with value.
I don't know about that because Breida is actually pretty small as well. So I don't know if that would work out the same way.
I think he catches the ball better, though. I'm just saying he would be their number one, and he would be a 3-down back, just like Gordon.
Like Gordon?
Or McKinnon. I'm sorry. Just like McKinnon.
Oh, like McKinnon? I don't know. So I don't agree with that because I think that they would wind up using a committee style between Joe Williams, assuming they keep him on the roster, and Matt Breida. That's what I think.
Is there a chance that Breida's going to get touches more than we would think right now? You know, I think a lot of people think McKinnon is a 3rd-down back. I don't buy it.
No,
I think he has. People taking him in the 2nd round. I wouldn't. Back same thing. I'd rather take a shot at Breida late in the round, and see what
happens. Fair. Yeah.
So, Seattle Seahawks, I'm just going to stay away from also because I'm not sure we know what's going on. Tampa Bay, you know what? Is it Ronald Jones? Is it Barber? Probably, Charles Sims. There's rumors Sims may not even make the roster. Right. I don't know. Staying away from that. The Redskins, you already mentioned Chris Thompson. He's a 3rd-down back, but same thing. I don't think he'd be the number one.
No.
If at this point, I think Geis is probably the number one, right?
Geis would be the one, and then if Geis were to go down, they'd turn back to Samaje Perine.
You think over Kelly?
Oh yeah. I think Kelly's done there, and I would assume that Perine would take the role if Geis were to fall.
All right, we actually did that fairly quickly. Is there any number 2s in your mind that I didn't mention that you would say you need to kind of look for? And like I said, or just your opinion on number 2s. My idea of number 2 running backs is I'm looking to draft running backs that late that are right now number 2 on the depth chart because I'm hoping they become the number 1. That's what I want. I want number 1, and I want to go into my Super Bowls with top 15 running backs. And there are some out there that if things fell right, that you can get late in drafts that could be a top 15 running back, and they'd be the number 1 on their team.
Absolutely, and I think you touched it well. I mean, obviously we hit all of them, but ones that I think that stood out to me, I'll give you 2 good and 2 bad. So 2 of the good ones that I think that people should definitely pay attention to are Latavius Murray for sure, because I'm just injury optimism is definitely a thing. And despite the fact that Dalvin Cook did go down in week 4, so he has had, let's say he's had the normal amount of time folks expect ACL recoveries to occur. Hasn't been a full year, but we're definitely coming up on it. Training camp reports have been fine, but why would you rush him into a full workload if he's the franchise he's the franchise running back for your team? Why would you not tamper back, set back his workload a little bit? Let Latavius Murray.
You're asking me the question. The reason they wouldn't is they think they can win the Super Bowl this year.
They wouldn't have to do that on Dalvin Cook. They could do that off of Latavius Murray on the goal line with their strong defense.
I'm playing devil's advocate. I'm saying the reason they would do it this year is because they think they can win the Super Bowl. So I'm not disagreeing with you, but this isn't a team that's, going to be 500 or less. So why take your guy and run him into the ground? These NFL teams now are taking their running backs, and you know what? They're giving them 300 carries if they can go to the Super Bowl.
Yes, to a certain degree, but I think in this particular case, with the amount of draft capital that went into Dalvin Cook, and the injury, absolutely. Right. I would, at least that's the way that I'm approaching it. So I would like to have a piece of that offense.
Right.
If we do think they're going to be a productive offense, then the cheaper piece, that'd be the one that I'm
give me one of your bads before we move on.
One of the bads that I would definitely think, I just can't get into Tevin Coleman. I don't know what it is.
I can't get into him for where he's going.
Yeah, I think it must be the price. I do think he's a fine player. But for his price, I mean, he's going in the 6th round, 7th round.
I just said 7th. I could probably look up PPR or ADP, but I think in that area.
I would rather take a shot on another wide receiver. I would try and look for. Give me Greg Olsen. Give me Delaney Walker. Give me Michael Crabtree. Give me Devin Funchess. I would take shots on any one of those wide receivers or tight ends well before I would try and dabble with Tevin Coleman. It just doesn't seem like on a week-to-week basis. If you're picking somebody in the 6th or 7th round, you really want a flex spot. for a running back, like in the 6th or 7th round, when you can get viable flex options at the running back position, I can get Ty Montgomery in the 10th round that could conceivably outscore Tevin Coleman, especially for the first 4 weeks of the season with just
I skipped Green Bay's only because they got like 5. You know, I mean, right now, I don't even know who their number 2 is. I'm not disagreeing that I would take a shot at a couple of, their running backs.
I mean, give me those guys for like 3 to 4 rounds later over Tevin Coleman. That's all I'm saying.
Right. Especially like Jones, when he comes back from, Aaron Jones is one I've been looking at grabbing more often than not because he's going even later than Ty Montgomery. Right. And, a lot of people think if he hadn't got suspended, he'd be their starter. So
nursing a hamstring injury. So definitely watch out for that.
All right. So then let's say then the end of your draft, Nick Chubb, CJ Anderson, or, Latavius Murray's going to hurt, or Spencer Ware. Which one of those 3 would you put on as your last pick?
Give me Spencer Ware, to be quite honest with you. I do think that in terms of who's the better player?
Well, no, I think player situation. I mean, this is a fantasy show. I get what you're saying player wise, but I think CJ Anderson of those 3 is the one that could be the starter week 1. So if I'm drafting that, and right now CJ Anderson's not going. You can get him in the last round in some cases, maybe a round or 2 more higher than the other 2 guys. The other 2, Chubb is going late. I have seen him not get drafted.
Absolutely.
But, I'm just saying, of those 3, I think CJ Anderson's one I'm taking because he's got a shot at being the number 1 right off the bat. So, all right, that's our number. That's our dropping a deuce on running backs. Let's. I don't know if this will be quicker, harder, easier. We got about 15, 20 minutes. We're still going to be over an hour, but we'll just do the same thing real quick. Now, number 2s to me on wide receivers are a little different because these are players that will be on the field in most cases all the time.
Right.
So the key to me on some of these that I might have done is marked them as really late number 2s, which mean they're really good value where people are overlooking and just, thinking they're not going to, hardly have anything versus a few that are the number 2, but maybe are actually going to see more targets than the number 1 as far as the depth charts go.
Possibly,
The first thing, obviously, the Cincinnati Bengals were, because again, I'm skipping the Baltimore Ravens and the Bills. Even though the Bills already have Corey Coleman as their number 2.
Yes.
I'm not drafting him, but that's where he's at. But the Bengals, obviously, their number 2 is John Ross. I think where he's going right now, which is not at all in a lot of drafts. I think he is going to move up now that some things have changed.
Hype train is definitely picking up now.
Obviously, John Ross has the ability. I don't think he would overtake A.G. Green, but I think he could equal him in targets. I mean, that's a possibility if they're double teaming Green, and Ross is a speedster. So I'd be curious there. I heard a podcast, and these are those things where as a fan, I hear things and I kind of listen, kind of not sure if I believe what the guy was going back, I want to say 10 years. Don't quote me on this. And I should have maybe wrote down the name, what podcast, but he was saying the list of second-year wide receivers that had nothing the first year that do great fantasy things the second year.
Very small.
None.
Yep.
I mean, he said none, meaning if they didn't do anything in their rookie year, the odds of them coming in season 2 and doing anything fantasy relevant is very slim, that it just doesn't happen.
Right.
So Ross is one of those, though. So, do you still,
Treadwell, those folks.
Do you still think, would you still put Ross as a player to keep an eye on? Are you still, would that change your mind at all?
No, it doesn't change my mind at all, because while history definitely puts us, I guess it gives us that context, given his place on the team, I'm finding it hard. I'm hard pressed to believe he's not at least going to at least get the opportunity. And at this point, that's all we can kind of hang our hats on. We don't know if he's going to be able to produce, but we do know he's going to be given the opportunity. Now, the other player that I actually would like to watch for, and that I might think could have the sneakiest value on the Bengals, is Tyler Boyd.
And I have him highlighted and just didn't know if we had time to go into Boyd. Also, I said thinking, right now, Boyd's not being drafted either.
Right. And he's the one that's going to wind up playing the slot because that was his role in college. It was his role actually last year.
At the end of last year, he was doing the slot.
Right. So if I were to hang my hat on anything, if AJ Green is still going to be playing on the outside, John Ross is going to be on the opposite side of him. And let's say Tyler Eifert is still hurt and they've just got Tyler Kroft in there. Tyler Boyd's going to be the guy in the slot, and I think that that's going to be a decent target for Andy Dalton. So I like both of those, but I can see those two having more equal value: John Ross and Tyler Boyd versus John Ross and AJ Green.
All right, let's skip Cleveland Browns. Obviously, right now it's Gordon and Landry. They're number 2. I would have actually said Callaway, but now with this issue, I would skip that. To me, the Denver Broncos have one of the better number 2s that has value right off the get-go, and that's Emmanuel Sanders. He is really being undervalued right now, but Emmanuel Sanders could come out and be the number 1 wide receiver on the Broncos. When I say number 1, I mean in targets and maybe fantasy points.
Possibly,
So, I mean, he's right there. Houston, Texas, I have Will Fuller. I just don't think personally he can duplicate what happened last year. The Indianapolis Colts, who knows?
Ryan Grant is the guy to watch for at this point. That's what I would agree.
I would agree, but the couple I've mentioned already, I would definitely all take before I would take Grant. Just mainly because of luck too. The fact we don't know what's going on with luck. Arizona Cardinals, that's kind of a little messy. The Falcons have Sanu and Ridley, again, questionable. The next one that to me could be is Carolina Panthers. That's DJ Moore. He's getting a lot of hype as a rookie. He's actually going higher than John Ross and Boyd, but he is out there and has some value. Again, I'm not a rookie guy. Chicago Bears, the one I have highlighted here only because I'm not sure, and I'm going to go all the way back to the Ross thing, and that's Kevin White. He's down there as their, I think, 3rd or 4th, not being drafted at all. Same thing. If I go 3 or 4 wide receivers early, or even a couple running backs early, and I got to throw some very late round guys on my team to put on my bench, that you just don't know, but you're also willing to drop if you have to. Kevin White's on my list. I mean, he was the John Ross 2 years ago. I mean, he was the number 1 wide receiver taken. He's got skills. He's been hurt. And to me, that doesn't go away. But at the same time, like the other guy said, if they've never done anything, the odds of them doing anything the next year is pretty slim. Cowboys, again, kind of a mess. Believe it or not, I think Beasley's the best option. If you'd say that you can get him as your last
cheapest option. Absolutely.
Yep. Detroit Lions. Obviously Marvin Jones is the number 2, but Galladay to me is the question mark / the option there for late fantasy. The one I like is the Packers. I am right now a Geronimo Allison person. Again, you can get him very late. And if he just happens to end up with being on the field as the number 2 on an Aaron Rodgers thing, he's going to have value, especially if Randall Cobb can't stay healthy. I would have trouble not taking him. Now there's question marks with him and some other issues, but he's the one I'm looking to get of the Packers, thing, because the only other issue is some people say before him, Ty Montgomery could go back into wide receiver if they got desperate. So I don't even know, if Ty Montgomery's in the slot, I don't know. But Geronimo Allison, same thing. You get him in the 14th, 15th round. So
at least, if he doesn't go undrafted.
But my point would be, if you can get the number 2 wide receiver on an Aaron Rodgers team, that's value. I mean, I guess I'd have to look up. I mean, Aaron Rodgers seems to always have, 2 people that have fantasy value. So
sure.
Jacksonville Jaguars. Keelan Cole.
That's the one I keep hearing about.
Yeah, rookie. Now, some people, D.D. Westbrook. It just depends on the draft. Both of them kind of go late, but sometimes D.D. goes before, sometimes after. Kansas City Chiefs. Hard to beat. I don't know. I'm a Sammy Watkins guy over Hill later, but he's still going higher than some of these other number twos, obviously. Sammy Watkins is going higher than a lot of the guys we're talking about. It is a new offense for him. But he's a good player. I mean, I think he has skills. The Chargers, which Williams are you on?
Right now, it's Tyrell Williams.
Tyrell Williams is the number 2, but Mike Williams is going all the way at the end of the draft.
Right.
And the rumor is he could play the slot / tight end. So that's kind of the question mark I have. I don't know. I probably won't own any. I'm a Keenan Allen guy. That is one of my number ones that I'm going after. Sure. The Miami Dolphins, a little bit of a mess, but Stills is there. And I have Amendola's on my late list. I don't know. Amendola seems to catch passes. You get him close to him, and he's not afraid of anything in the middle of the field.
True. Yeah.
New England Patriots. Chris Hogan's number 2 on their depth chart, but he's obviously going to be their number 1 for the first 4 weeks.
Yep.
And now you have Eric Decker in the mix. So same thing. I'm just a believer. To me, on the Patriots, if you get one, I'm getting the latest one. The problem with that is if you're waiting for the latest ones of all these number 2s or 3s, sometimes you don't get them because someone else will take them around before you will. But I don't know. I mean, the problem with Chris Hogan is you got to take him awful early, and you might only, he's only maybe going to be the number 1 for 4 weeks. Right. The Jets is a mess. Raiders, who knows? I'm not obviously a Nelson or Bryant fan. The Steelers is a big one just because you have Juju, and then you have the kid, Washington is tearing it up, they say. So the key there, Antonio Brown, if I'm not mistaken, hasn't made it the last 2 years without missing some games. Either one of those could quickly be Ben's number 1. Now, the problem with wide receivers and number 1, it's not like running backs. Just because you become the number 1 wide receiver doesn't mean you have the skills to do it. You know what I'm saying? It's not like running back where there's a lot of people working for you to make a 10-yard run. When you're the wide receiver, you do a lot of that work on your own. And if you don't have the skills, it doesn't matter if you're the 1 or not.
Exactly. Yeah. We'll just go, look back to the 2015 season when Jordy Nelson went down with the ACL tear and they tried to run the offense through Randall Cobb. Didn't really work out all too well.
Right. Because that's not his game.
No.
So, so again, Washington is the one I'm going for because he's going even later. I mean, he's a rookie. He's going late. He's one of the few rookies, wide receivers I have penciled in. So, the Los Angeles Rams, Woods or Cup?
I'll take Robert Woods.
But Cup is going a little bit later, but both of them to me are going a little too early compared to some of these other people because everyone thinks the Rams are going to throw for 8,000 yards and score 500 million points. I don't know.
I just don't see it happening.
Me neither. Because the only question I have is if Cooks doesn't work out, I personally think Cup has a better shot at being the number 1 guy. That would be my argument between Woods and Cup. The skill level to me, I just think Cup has a better shot at someday being a true number 1, meaning, drawing the offense. I just think he has a little more skill than Woods, but hey, I'm a fan. What the hell do I know?
I think if I'm not mistaken, Cup though has been mostly relegated to the slot. That's what he
in practice this year, but I don't see. I didn't think that in college. I thought he played wide out, but I'd have to look back. I have Cups marked down because if he goes later, that's just what I'm interested in.
Right.
The Vikings, they're number 2 or number 1, just depends on who you talk to.
Exactly. Yeah.
I have Thielen as a number 2 because I'm more of a Diggs guy.
Same.
But that's a little hard. The New Orleans Saints. Is it Meredith?
Meredith?
Is it Ginn? I'm not sure who the number 2 is there, but I think I want a piece of this offense. Thomas is one of the wide receivers I'm looking at early. And if I get him, I don't care about the other 2. But if I don't get him, Cameron Meredith has been the one I've kind of been penciling in late. Just,
sure.
If he takes off, I'm willing to go that over again. Traquan Smith, I don't know. I mean,
I've heard a lot of hype about him. A lot of folks that follow that go the dynasty route, a lot of them are picking him up they're picking him up as quick as possible.
I'm never a fan of 2 people for one spot, but let's say you're drafting 2 weeks before the season start. Would you consider putting both of those on your team?
No, that's too much draft capital. We don't know what that team is going to look like, and especially since we don't know what that offense is going to look like.
What's the value of the number 2 Saints quarterback, or do you just don't think he's going to throw as much? I just think he's going to throw more because Ingram's hurt for 4 weeks. That's all. I just
throw enough to support that many wide receivers when he has.
No, I'm not saying support all of them. I'm saying if one of them takes off, meaning if I have Meredith and I have Traquan Smith and I drafted them, and then we got 2 weeks of preseason, and then the season starts, and they come out and say Traquan Smith is our number 2 and he's starting. I have no problem. Boom, quickly I can drop the other guy, and I have the number 2 starter to at least start the season. I don't know. I'm asking as a fan. That isn't something I probably will do, because
that wouldn't be my way to go about it, because then you just never know on a week-to-week basis. Because with Traquan Smith, his game is similar to Ted Ginn's.
No, but I think you're missing my point. I'm not going to start the season with both. But what I'm saying is, instead of drafting a kicker or a defense, I'd pick one of these for meaning if I'm going to take one anyway, and now instead of taking a defense and holding them for 2 weeks before the season starts, I'd much rather have Meredith. Let's say I draft Meredith in the 14th, and then it comes all the way down, and I got to take a defense, or I can take some random guy. You know what? Maybe I take Traquan, and then before the first week game comes out, whichever one they name as the starter, I drop the other one, pick up my defense. That's what I'm saying. I mean, to me, those are games I don't mind playing.
I don't know. It wouldn't be for me, though.
You'd rather have a defense on your team?
I'd rather no, if I was going to pick another player, I would pick a player from a different team rather than stacking both of those from the same team.
Okay. All right. The Giants, Sterling Shepard, I mean, same thing. I think he's going to hair high, but he's definitely one of those. If I go running back, he in a lot of my drafts ends up being my 3rd wide receiver. I mean, sometimes even the 2nd, if I get a little carried away and go running back Gronk or something crazy just to play around with. There's sometimes, Odell Beckham, has some health issues once in a while. And is that passing game going to open up now to have a running game? So who knows? So the Eagles have Aguilar, who right now is technically going to be their number 1, maybe at the rate it's going to start the season. So
it could be.
Mike Wallace, I don't know. I'm probably staying away from that offense as far as any of those. The 49ers, Goodwin or Garcon. I'm not even sure who the one is. In camp, it goes back and forth from what I keep hearing. I kind of want a piece of this offense.
Me too.
I don't see myself drafting McKinnon. He's going too early. Brady, you didn't like. I mean, even though I still might pick him towards the very end, but
sure.
Obviously the issue right now for me might be if he drops far enough. Alshon Jeffrey actually might be the one I'd try to take if he drops far enough.
It depends on how far. Absolutely.
I don't have a problem. Especially if you play a team with IRs, I don't have a problem taking a good injured player. Sounds bad, but if you have an IR player, you have an IR spot, the reason for an IR spot is you need to take advantage of it, or you're wasting a spot. Yeah. So, I mean, if he drops low enough, he is one of those. And I always every draft I have 2 or 3 IR guys circled, meaning I'm looking for someone I can draft and drop immediately into my IR spot, and then pick up somebody off waivers. So, he is one of those. So, the Seattle Seahawks right now, it's Tyler Lockett. A lot of people are saying, this could be his year. He's fast. He's going late enough. I've looked at the same thing. If you go running back early, if Tyler Lockett's your third running back or your flex or your running back wide receiver, your flex wide receiver, I don't think you do that bad. And obviously, if you get points for anything that they would do on special teams, you got a shot at a touchdown and some yards there too. So
exactly,
he's fun to watch.
Exactly. And actually, he just had a press conference, if not today, then late yesterday, kind of explaining the 2017 season and where he was at in terms of.
I mean, he wasn't healthy.
Right, he wasn't healthy, and then of course the busted leg, the horrific injury that he had, and everything of that nature. So I do think there's still some gas left in that tank.
All right, Tampa Bay. I don't know. It's Evans, good one. Jackson, I'm out. If I do anything, it's going to be Evans early. Washington Redskins. That's one to me where I'm taking whichever one drops the lowest. Richardson actually in most drafts is going the lowest, but he did show up as their number one on their depth chart. Then you have Dotson, and then you have Crowder. I'm taking whichever one goes late. So
it'll probably be Dotson, especially at the rate that his injuries keep popping up in the news. He had the shoulder thing. He's had his heel drained. So it seems like he's like the new Jordan Reed.
Right.
Which is, I mean, pretty sad.
Right. Jordan Reed doesn't need another Jordan Reed.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right. Well, I covered all the number twos that I had. And again, to me, number twos, that's how you win championships or win Super Bowls. If you hit the right number twos, because most of us don't screw up the number ones too often, so you new fantasy players, number twos are what you need to study a little bit. Those are the ones. And that's why I always hate, and we talked about it a while back, some of these mock drafts that some of these other, podcasts do, they always mock like the first 3 rounds. I'm like, who gives a shit? I know who I'm picking in I don't need your help for the first 3 rounds.
I want the later rounds.
Right. You know what? I'm good enough at this. I'm sure I need your first 10 rounds, but I like hearing weird ideas on those, last few rounds.
It's like 8 to 14. That's generally where, folks start reaching. That's when like most drafters, depending on if it's like a casual league, you might get some quarterbacks in the 4th, 5th, 6th round, but between 8 to 14, that's where you start seeing all the positions now opening up. People are grabbing wide receivers, running backs, quarterbacks, and tight ends. So there's a lot of variation that can come in terms of like who you're going to select. Positional runs might happen because the second the 9th round hits, somebody might draft that first quarterback, and then you might see 8 go before it's your pick. So then what are you going to do?
Well, and that's what I would tell people. And that's the way I look at it. And again, it's my opinion. And that's what all this is when you're listening to fantasy, air quotes, experts, is, it's opinion. And some of it is philosophy of game. I'm an aggressive player. It's worked for me so far. I draft a little crazy at the end. I want people that, it's in poker. I want the small suited cards that, that I have a lot of options with that are deceiving, Sure. I want those crazy guys that to me have more value because they can be, and the number one, and they're the other value they have, back to the, small pair in poker, the other value they have is they're droppable. If you draft handcuffs and you draft some of these, they're not droppable because the situation hasn't happened yet. So you're going to draft them as a handcuff, but you have to drop them before that. Now that was useless of a pick. I'm drafting, and again, I know, and I don't say you made fun. You questioned a few of my people I marked up, and that's because I look at it a little different. The droppability is part of my decision factor when on some of those players,
and that makes sense. Yeah,
there are a few of those that their upside is very high and their floor is very, very low, which means I can leave them in the basement if I need to and move on, and and that works for me. And the more of those you have at the bottom, the more you can move them if you need to. But then the odds are you only need 1 or 2 to hit. People don't, there have been, questionable players that end up in the top, and I always use the top 15 because top 15 players, if you have three or four 15 top players in fantasy points on your team, you're going to the Super Bowl probably. You're definitely in the playoffs.
Sure.
So you obviously can do it if you have 2 top 5 players and then a bunch of top 20s. But my point is, I'm looking for, I want as many number ones as I can get on my team. If I can, towards the playoff time, if I can put a lineup in there where I go, I'm putting in all number ones, then I've worked I drafted well. I worked my roster well. Yes. I did the waivers. I maybe made some trades. My objective is to start in the playoffs, depending on your roster size, 12, 14 players, whatever it is. And I'd love to look there and go, man, I got all number ones. Doesn't mean they're the best at that spot, but it does mean they're coming into that game that week, going to get the most opportunity, and that'll give me the most opportunity to win.
Exactly. And I'm 100% with you on that point. And especially if you draft the way that you just described, your flexibility at being able to pick up players off the waiver wire, so that if the player that you draft isn't the lottery ticket, you definitely have the expendable asset on your roster to pick up that lottery ticket that just became available on the waiver wire.
Right. And hey, back to, so you lose game 1, and now you're the number 1 waiver wire pick, and somebody went down. I'm not going to say any particular names, but there's a handful of guys. If they go down in week 1, their backup is.
Just look at the previous seasons. Look at when Le'Veon Bell went down a couple of years ago, and it was D'Angelo Williams that won.
He won leagues. He won leagues.
What was it? And also when Tim Hightower, when he got picked up by the Saints, nobody thought that old man was going to do anything.
And just last year, a lot of people forget, Ware was the starter last year for a lot of the drafting season. So there's a lot of people that drafted Ware, and the guy that ended up having the value, was Hunt. Now I realized
being drafted, 2, 3, 4 rounds later.
Well, no, before the injury, he was being drafted in the 10th, 11th round.
In some cases, yeah.
Hunt in most home leagues was not a name.
In home leagues, absolutely, yes.
Now he played in Ohio here, and some of the Ohio leagues, people that are, Toledo fans or, whatever, or, you watch the MAC on TV. Sure. From what I saw in most, yes. And that's the difference. In most expert leagues, people were taking Hunt. They saw his potential, blah, 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 but they were taking him a lot later than Ware. In most home leagues, Ware was going very late, if at all, until that injury happened. And in some cases, you don't even get to use your waiver wire till after the first week. So there were people that would, if they played their cards and had the right person to drop, they were able to pick up Ware the first week in the waivers.
Yes.
Or not Ware, Hunt. So, keep your hand versatile. That's what's nice about, limping in with a couple, a suited small cards. Just
get in for the minimum, get out, not losing a lot.
Yeah, right. Because it's, what you can win if they hit is a lot bigger,
Exactly.
So, don't be afraid. That's just my philosophy. And again, I know you'll hear experts out there say different things, but it's just kind of because I enjoy the play. I enjoy the free agency. I enjoy the stuff. I like having a person to drop or two. I'll be honest, last year I had a good team the whole season, and I didn't have to do a whole lot, and it kind of sucks sometimes on some of your better teams where you're like, I would get texts from people going, hey, you're just not, I made you a couple trade offers. Like, well, I'm not, my team's kind of set. Yeah, but you always trade a lot. I didn't need to, my team was, pretty good. And, and that's your goal. It just last year for me, it happened a lot quicker, than I wanted. And not that wanted. That's what we all want. I said, you want as many number ones on your team as quick as possible. I actually had the number 1 waiver pick, and I held it all season. I never even had to use it. Until the first week of the playoffs, and I used it to block somebody from picking up I didn't need anybody, but the other person had I don't remember exact details. I want to say a tight end went down, and I just went ahead and picked up the number 1 tight end that was available and made him pick up, somebody else. I forget exactly what it was, but I figured, if I don't use it now, maybe I don't get to use it at all. And I just kind of use it as a block. So I went, 13 weeks where what was nice is when you have the number one waiver wire and you hang on to it all those times, you can drop people knowing I'll get him back if I need him, meaning it does give you even more flexibility. You say, I really don't want to drop this guy, but I do have the number one waiver wire pick. So if something happens, I get him first. And that's if you're not playing Fab. My home league, those guys, I've talked to them a few times. They don't understand it, so they don't want to do it. It just seems too difficult for them. I feel a big advantage that it's that it's not a Fab personally, but have a good time. Chris, that was kind of fun. Me and you dropped it. We dropped a Deuce tonight. We talked about all those number twos and had a good time. And that's because, you know what? Everyone talks about going number one, and that's easy. Every podcast out there right now is talking about all the number ones and the who do you pick if you got the 4 spot. Right. You know what? We're here bringing you we're bringing you the deuces.
Exactly.
So
that's what
we're bringing you the ones who win you leagues. Again, these experts, they like to talk, they want you to listen. So they're talking about players y'all know, people that hey, you know what? They're the fluff and we're the finishers. Yeah. So I had a good time. Chris, where can people read your articles, find you? Give me some information.
You can find me on Twitter at Chris Allen FFWX, and then you can find most of my writings over at either 4for4 or Fantrax.
All right. I'm Easy Kill, just Easy Kill at a fantasy fan on Twitter, or just a fantasy fan at Gmail. If you want to shoot us a note, a question, a topic, we'll be happy to talk about it. We didn't even get into, we got games starting this week. So next week, we'll probably get into a lot of that type stuff. And again, we'll probably come with a topic that is a little different than what you're going to get on all the other podcasts. And we'll have fun with it. I had a good time tonight. Appreciate all of you for coming out. And you know what? Say goodnight.